Fundamentally, the future is vastly more exciting and interesting if we're a spacefaring civilization and a multi-planet species than if we're not. You want to be inspired by things. You want to wake up in the morning and think the future is going to be great. And that's what being a spacefaring civilization is all about. It's about believing in the future and thinking that the future will be better than the past. And I can't think of anything more exciting than going out there and being among the stars.
What do you think the odds of the Mars colony are at this point?
Well, oddly enough, I actually think they're pretty good.
So like, when can I go?
Okay. At this point, I am certain there is a way. I'm certain that success is one of the possible outcomes for establishing a self-sustaining Mars colony, in fact, a growing Mars colony. I'm certain that that is possible. Whereas until maybe a few years ago, I was not sure that success was even one of the possible outcomes. It's a meaningful number of people going to Mars. I think this is potentially something that can be accomplished in about 10 years, maybe sooner, maybe 9 years. I need to make sure that Spacex doesn't die between now and then, and that I don't die, or if I do die, that someone takes over who will continue that. Million-person threshold, from the point at which the first ship goes to Mars, it's probably somewhere between 20 to 50 total Mars rendezvous. So it's probably somewhere between maybe 40 to 100 years to achieve a fully self-sustaining civilization on Mars.
And anyone for the early people that go to Mars, it'll be far more dangerous. I mean, really, it kind of reads like Shackleton's ad for Antarctic explorers. You know, it's like difficult, dangerous, good chance you'll die. Excitement for those who survive. That kind of thing. I think there's not many people who actually want to go in the beginning, because all those things I said are true. But there'll be some who will, for whom the excitement of the frontier and exploration exceeds the concern of danger. And they will start off building the most elementary infrastructure, just a base to create propellant, a power station, glass domes in which to grow crops, all of the sort of fundamentals without which you cannot survive. And then really there's going to be an explosion of entrepreneurial opportunity. But I can tell you what I know currently is the case is that we are building the first ship, the first Mars or interplanetary ship right now, and I think we'll be able to do short flights, short sort of up and down flights, probably sometime in the first half of next year. And this is a very big booster and ship. The liftoff thrust of this would be about twice that of a Saturn V.
But because Mars has lower gravity than Earth, you do not need a booster. So you can go all the way from the surface of Mars to the surface of Earth just using the ship. Albeit you need to go to a max payload number of about 20 to 50 tons for the return journey to work. But it's a single stage all the way back to Earth. I feel fairly confident that we can complete the ship and be ready for a launch in about 5 years. 5 years seems like a long time to me.
When do you think realistically human beings will land on Mars for the first time?
I feel fairly confident about 6 years from now. So the Mars, Earth-Mars synchronization occurs roughly every 26 months. So we had one this year, this summer, and so that means in roughly like about 2 years there'll be another one, and then 2 years after that. So I'd say if you say 6 years from now, I think highly confident. If we get lucky, maybe 4 years, and then we want to try to send a uncrewed vehicle there in 2 years.
When will your first trip to orbit will take place?
I don't know, possibly in 2 or 3 years. I'm mostly concerned with developing the technology that can enable a lot of people to go to Mars and make life multi-planetary, have a base on the moon, a city on Mars, and I think it's important that we strive to have a self-sustaining city on Mars as soon as possible. I mean, I'm optimistic about the future on Earth, but it's important to have life insurance for life as a whole.
One option if we want to become a multi-planet civilization, and that's Mars. We could conceivably go to our moon, and I certainly have nothing against going to the moon, but I think it's challenging to create become multi-planetary on the moon because it's much smaller than a planet. It doesn't have any atmosphere. It's not as resource-rich as Mars. It's got a 28-day day, whereas the Mars day is 24.5 hours. And in general, Mars is far better suited to ultimately scale up to be a self-sustaining civilization.
Earth-Mars synchronization happens roughly every 2 years. So every 2 years there's an opportunity for to fly to Mars. So then in 2024, we want to try to fly 4 ships. 2 of which would be crewed, and 2 of which two cargo and two crew. The goal of these initial missions is to find the best source of water. That's for the first mission, and then the second mission, the goal is to build the propellant plant.
How much time before there's regular travel back and forth to Mars?
Well, I think it's going to take a while to build a real civilization. The threshold that really matters is for getting past the Great Filter. We have enough resources on Mars such that if the spaceships from Earth stop coming,
You can survive.
Yeah. So now you can only be just missing one little thing. You'd be like, you're on a long sea voyage, and the only thing you're missing is vitamin C. Still not good. It's only a matter of time, you know.
Yeah.
And then it's gonna be curtains. So you got to have all the things necessary to sustain civilization on Mars. And the reason that the ships from Earth stop coming could be World War III, or it could be due to a slow decline of civilization. So civilization here on Earth could end with a bang or a whimper.
So there's been a lot of great work by NASA and other organizations in early exploration of Mars and understanding what Mars is like, where could we land, what's the composition of the atmosphere, where is there water, water ice, I should say, and so we need to go from these early exploration missions to actually building a city.
That's fascinating. I was just wondering if you were to start over with a clean sheet of paper on governance, do you think a framework that could be envisioned that encompasses other sentient beings to come, meaning the AIs and others who might clamor for their rights alongside, right?
It's difficult to predict, but I can say, I think probably we would aim for a more direct democracy. And then I was talking to Larry Page about this, and he had a good suggestion, we should limit the number of words in a law. Because we have these 1,000-page laws that get passed, and nobody's read them.
Twitter equivalent of parsimony?
Yeah, I don't know, 1,000-word letter count or something like that. If you can't write the law in 1,000 words, then probably it shouldn't be there.
In the long term, you can use solar power to extract CO2 from the atmosphere, combine it with water, and produce fuel and oxygen for the rocket. So the same thing that we would do on Mars, we could do on Earth in the long term. But that's essentially what happens. Similar to the moon, you land on Mars. The tricky thing with Mars is we do need to build a propellant depot to refill the tanks and return to Earth.
When will there be a manned SpaceX mission, and when will you go to Mars?
Well, we're pretty close to sending crew up to the space station. That's currently scheduled for the end of next year.
Yeah.
So that'll be exciting with our Dragon 2 spacecraft, and then we'll have a next generation rocket and spacecraft beyond the Falcon Dragon series, and I'm hoping to describe that architecture later this year at the International Astronautical Congress, which is the big international space event every year. So I think that'll be quite exciting.
Yeah.
And in terms of me going, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 years from now, maybe going to the space station would be nice.
Oh, wow.
And then in terms of the first flights to Mars, we're hoping to do that in around 2025.
SpaceX is an astonishing achievement, but you've also got your plans for Mars?
Think about the future, it's just, if we're out there exploring stars, it's so much more exciting and inspiring than one where we are forever confined to Earth.
And a Mars mission?
Yeah, so in order to make Mars work, we need kind of the next generation of rockets and spacecraft. And we think we've got something that will enable people to move to Mars for approximately $500,000.
$500,000?
Yeah. And you can get a free return ticket with that, by the way. So
the thing that most people say about you is the vision of the future that you have is quite breathtaking. And so many times along the way, people have naysayed, haven't they?
I guess there's certainly been a lot of attacks. One thing I've noticed in recent months and years is that it's become obvious to a lot of the entrenched interests that Tesla and SpaceX are not going to die. Previously, they thought, well, they just basically ignored us or laughed at us. Now we're actually starting to make real inroads, and they're treating us as a real threat. And so it is quite daunting. So by establishing a propellant depot in the asteroid belt or on one of the moons of Jupiter, you can make flights from Mars to Jupiter no problem. In fact, even without a propellant depot at Mars, you can do a flyby of Jupiter without a propellant depot.
To use a giant plane with huge cargo for a long trip, then that costs way less than buying a small plane for a short trip in the aircraft world. And the same actually is true of rocketry. A BFR flight will actually cost less than our Falcon 1 flight did back in the day. So that was about a $5 or $6 million marginal cost per flight. We're confident that BFR will be less than that. So that's profound, and that is what will enable the creation of a permanent base on the Moon and a city on Mars. And that's the equivalent of like the Union Pacific Railroad, or having ships that can cross the oceans. Until you can get there, there's no way for all of the entrepreneurial energy to you can't do anything. There's no way for all the flowers to bloom. Once you can get there, the opportunity is immense. So we're going to do our best to get you there, and then make sure that there's an environment in which entrepreneurs can flourish. And then I think it'll be amazing.
I think there are really two fundamental paths. History is going to bifurcate along two directions. One path is we stay on Earth forever, and then there will be some eventual extinction event. I don't have an immediate doomsday prophecy, but it's eventually, history suggests there will be some doomsday event. The alternative is to become a spacefaring civilization and a multi-planet species, which I hope you would agree that is the right way to go. Could you colonize the galaxy in a million years? Absolutely, the entire galaxy.
So you would start with Mars, build bases on Mars, then use Mars to jump off to all these other planets, set up places there, and over thousands of years easily.
Just kind of like,
So
hop from
that's-
one solar system to the next, and
That
Is it going to be a business kind of tourism in orbit, or is it more kind of plan B if things on Earth do not develop as well?
It's not exactly a plan B. It's more that I think there's two aspects to this. One is that we want to have a future that is inspiring and exciting. And what are the things that you find inspiring and exciting about the future? And I think a future where we are a spacefaring civilization and out there among the stars, I think that's, every kid gets excited about that. You don't even need to teach them.
And you seriously want to be buried on Mars?
If you're gonna die someday, I'm like, okay, do you want to be buried on Mars or Earth? I'm like, Mars sounds cool, born on Earth, die on Mars, that's, if you got the choice.
So just to give some comparison between the two planets, they're actually they're remarkably close in a lot of ways. In fact, we now believe that early Mars was a lot like Earth. And in fact, if we could warm Mars up, we would once again have a thick atmosphere and liquid oceans. So where things are right now, Mars is about half again as far from the sun as Earth. So still decent sunlight. It's a little cold, but we can warm it up. It has a very helpful atmosphere, which in the case of Mars being primarily CO2 with some nitrogen and argon and a few other trace elements, means that we can grow plants on Mars just by compressing the atmosphere. And it has nitrogen too, which is also very important for growing plants. It would be quite fun to be on Mars because you'd have gravity, which is about 37% that of Earth. So you'd be able to lift heavy things and bound around and have a lot of fun. And the day is remarkably close to that of Earth. And so we just need to change that bottom row. Because currently we have 7 billion people on Earth and 0 on Mars.
And then of course, Mars, becoming a multi-planet species, beats the hell out of being a single planet species. So, so we'd start off by sending a mission to Mars, where it would be obviously just landing on rocky ground or dusty ground. And it's the same approach that I mentioned before, which is you send the spaceship up to orbit, you retank it or refill it until it has full tanks, and it travels to Mars, lands on Mars. For Mars, you will need local propellant production. But Mars has a CO2 atmosphere and plenty of water ice. That gives you CO2 and H2O, so you can make, therefore, CH4 and O2 using the Sabatier process.
It is a little hard to process. I think at this point I am somewhat overcome by emotion to try to come up with cohesive sentences that make any sense is quite difficult. But I think this is hopefully the first step on a journey towards a civilization on Mars, life becoming multi-planetary, based on the moon and expanding beyond Earth, and life becoming a multi-planet species, life becoming multi-planetary for the first time in the 4.5 billion year history of Earth. I think this is hopefully the first step on that journey. It will require a tremendous amount of innovation and technology development to make going to orbit and ultimately beyond orbit a routine matter where thousands and perhaps ultimately millions of people can travel to other planets. That's what we really need to achieve over time. That's obviously a very difficult goal, but that's seeming increasingly real with what happened today. That getting people to orbit finally after 18 years. If we are able to increase the rate of innovation, then life can become multi-planetary. This is the goal we should strive for.
If you know that there's likely to be, we don't know, but there's likely to be another Dark Ages, which it seems, my guess is there probably will be at some point. I'm not predicting that we're about to enter Dark Ages, but that there's some probability that we will, particularly if there's a Third World War. Then we want to make sure that there's enough of a seed of human civilization somewhere else to bring civilization back, and perhaps shorten the length of the Dark Ages. I think that's why it's important to get a self-sustaining base. Ideally on Mars, because Mars is far enough away from Earth that a war on Earth, the Mars base might survive. It's more likely to survive than a moon base. But I think a moon base and a Mars base that could perhaps help regenerate life back here on Earth would be really important, and to get that done before a possible World War III. What I know currently is the case is that we are building the first ship, the first Mars or interplanetary ship. right now, and I think we'll be able to do short flights, short sort of up and down flights, probably sometime in the first half of next year. I mean, the moon and Mars are often thought of as like, is this some escape hatch for rich people? But it won't be.
Everyone would want to go. In fact, I think a relatively small number of people from Earth would want to go, but enough would want to go and who could afford the trip that it would happen. And people can get sponsorship, and I think it gets to the point where almost anyone, if they saved up and this was their goal, they could ultimately save up enough money to buy a ticket and move to Mars. And Mars would have a labor shortage for a long time, so jobs would not be in short supply. On Mars, dawn and dusk are blue, and it's the sky. So the sky is blue in dawn and dusk, and red during the day. It's the opposite of Earth.
You're 47. What is the likelihood that you personally will go to Mars?
70%. We've recently made a number of breakthroughs that I'm just really fired up about.
And when does that happen? In our lifetimes?
Yeah. I'm talking about moving there. So it's like, so if you can get the price per ticket maybe around $200,000.
This could be an escape hatch for rich people.
No, your probability of dying on Mars is much higher than Earth. Really, the ad for going to Mars would be like Shackleton's ad for going to the Antarctic. It's going to be hard. There's a good chance of death. Going in a little can through deep space. You might land successfully. Once you land successfully, there will be you'll be working non-stop to build the base. So you're not much time for leisure. And once you get there, even after doing all this, it's a very harsh environment, so there's a good chance you die there. We think you can come back, but we're not sure. Now, does that sound like an escape hatch for rich people?
And yet you would unhesitatingly go.
You know, there's lots of people that climb mountains. You know why they climb mountains? Because people die on Everest all the time. They like doing it for the challenge.
You're the CEO of SpaceX, and you've said that your ultimate goal is to get humankind to Mars. I've heard your response to the question, but these guys need to hear it. Why is Mars important? Why does Mars matter?
Sure. Well, I think it's really a fundamental decision we need to make as a civilization. What kind of future do we want? Do we want a future where we are forever confined to one planet until some eventual extinction event, however far in the future that might occur? Or do we want to become a multi-planet species and then ultimately be out there among the stars and be among many planets, many star systems? And I think the latter is a far more exciting and inspiring future than the former. And Mars is the next natural step. In fact, it's the only planet we really have a shot at establishing a self-sustaining city on. And I think once we do establish such a city, there will be a strong forcing function for the improvement of spaceflight technology that will then enable us to establish colonies elsewhere in the solar system and ultimately extend beyond our solar system.
The great thing about going to space is there's no friction. So once you're out of the atmosphere, you will go, it will be smooth as silk, no turbulence, nothing. There's no weather, there's no atmosphere. And you can get to most long distance places, like I said, in less than half an hour. And if we're building this thing to go to the moon and Mars, then why not go to other places on Earth as well? All right, thank you.